This is Cars and Bids, and today it is time for another Cars and Bids market report where I am looking back over some sales and no sales over the last few weeks, and I'll let you know what I think of them and where I see market trends from these sales. So let's get started. Okay, over the last few weeks at Cars and Bids, we have had some very successful weeks. A huge sale rate, some big cars we've had selling, and very encouraged by the current situation with Cars and Bids. I'm going to go over a few of the more interesting and more important sales in this market report. The number one most video-worthy sale was this 2014 Cadillac Cts-V Wagon, which sold earlier this week for $56,000. That's a lot of money for a Cadillac wagon from this era. You know, I had a buddy who bought one of these when I lived in Atlanta around 2014, 2015, and he paid like $60 for a manual one. And he asked me at the time, do you think these will hold their value? And I said, that's insane. Of course they won't. It's a Cadillac wagon. It's like 2 years old. It's going to depreciate like every other car. Boy, was I wrong. These V-Wagons are still commanding an enormous amount of money. And this particular one, it wasn't particularly low mileage, it wasn't incredibly special, except for the fact that it is a manual transmission Cts-V wagon, and they don't come up very often, and when they do, there is intense interest. $56,000. What was the sticker on this car? 70? It's barely lost any money, and it's a pretty new car. Now, this is a one-owner California car, which was special, so good weather its whole life, no salt, none of that stuff, and one owner from new. Not too many Cts-V wagons still with their original owner, and I guess this one isn't either. But on the topic of these wagons, in terms of a market report, there's no question these bring all the money, and I think they will continue to. Not too often you see a supercharged V8 560 horsepower station wagon with a manual transmission. It's like every car enthusiast's dream, and they're just not losing value, and I suspect they won't. Okay, next up, another great sale, this 1993 Mercedes-Benz 400e AMG car. So this is pre-merger AMG, and the wheels, these old school AMG wheels, I just love them. This sold for $36,750, which is a pretty good number, especially for a 400e. Couple things to mention here. Number one, this auction highlights some of the benefits of doing no reserve. The seller of this car, very confident in the car, very confident in its presentation for it, which was excellent with great photos, and also confident in the car's rarity and its specialness. And so he listed it no reserve. No reserve generally benefits sellers. It generally brings a little extra money. And that was certainly true in this case. There's a big bidding war at the end. And when no reserve is on, there's a lot of stakes. Like, this thing is selling. You know, if I'm not the winning bidder, I'm not getting it. And that's a pretty big deal. So this car sold big money, and it's a special car. And I think that's another thing highlighted here. It's not like there's really a market on these pre-merger AMG 400e. I mean, how many are there? You know, this one was imported from Japan. There's probably only a handful of these in North America at all. And pre-merger AMG cars are just rare generally. And so this is a special car. But this is the kind of thing that happens when you bring a truly special, very ultra rare car to the table. Frankly, it's also true of that Cts-V wagon. When you bring stuff that just is impossible to find anywhere else, the bidding shows up, and this is the result, $37,000. A good result, especially for a 400e. Okay, next up, another big one, this 2008 Honda S2000. About 34,000 miles on this car. It sold for $29,000, which I think makes this our second highest Honda S2000 sale, right around there. This is a very special car, very late production S2000. And you know, it's funny, back in 2008, 2009, I remember Honda just couldn't sell them. And they came out with that CR, the special edition, the Club Racer version, because they needed like a run-out model to try to move a few more units. People weren't buying. The car had been on sale for 9 years at that point, 10 years. It just wasn't as cool as it was. But almost immediately after the S2000 went out of production, they started to become more sought after. And these days, the AP2s, and especially the very late AP2 models, which are very uncommon because there weren't many of them, they're bringing big money. And this car in yellow, which is a desirable, special, cool color, with relatively low mileage, only 34,000 miles, unmodified. You know, a lot of these were questionably modified in weird ways, not this car. And so, no surprise, in my opinion, to see it go for $29,000. The market on S2000s is very strong. We have done an incredibly good job on Cars and Bids with S2000s. In fact, we've had 16 S2000s come through Cars and Bids, and only one failed to sell. The market is just really hot on these right now. It's also very easy to put reserves on them, figure out what they're worth. Pretty easy to come to an agreement because so many of them are selling. But generally speaking, this car is white hot. Everybody wants the S2000, and this particular one I just knew would be strong. A late production in a special color with low mileage. This is the S2000 you want. Okay, next one. Here's a very interesting one. We have done surprisingly well on cars and bids with Hummers, believe it or not. We've had 8 Hummers come through, 7 have sold, but the really surprising thing to me is that all of the H2s and H3s we've had have sold. That market seems to be surprisingly hot. Everybody wants SUVs right now, so it shouldn't be that surprising, but it is a little surprising because Hummer went away because no one was really interested in them in 08, 09. Well, apparently it's back. So the Hummer I want to highlight is this 2009 H3T Alpha, which sold for $30,000. That was a great result for this truck, but I'm not surprised. This is a very special truck. You look at this, you don't know anything about Hummers or off-roaders. You're like, okay, a Hummer, the pickup, who cares? Well, the H3T was the pickup truck version of the H3, and it was very rare. It came near the end, not that many people bought it. The Alpha was the V8 version. So you have the H3T, and then you have this, the Alpha, the V8 pickup truck Hummer, tremendously uncommon, very, very rare. Then you have this one, which only had 56,000 miles. It was a one-owner truck, and it was almost completely unmodified. So this is a very special, very unusual H3T, and if you're looking for that, it's another situation where good luck trying to find another. But I think the general point of view here is we've now sold like 3 or 4 H2s. They've all brought what we thought they would, or well over what we thought they would. I think the general point of view is Hummer is actually selling pretty well. We're doing pretty well, and not just with H1s, which have always been kind of collectible, valuable, trade hands among enthusiasts kind of cars. We're also now doing well with special H2s and H3s. You know, a run-of-the-mill H3 is probably not going to do all that well. A high mileage H2, same deal, but low mileage ones that are nicely modified, or H3T Alpha like this, rare truck, they're bringing money and they're selling, and I'm surprised to see that, but that's the reality of the market right now. SUVs and off-roaders are huge right now. Okay, next up, speaking of SUVs, another sale I'm proud of a few weeks ago, this 2013 Volvo Xc60 sold for $20,970. This came in to us, and I was the one who put the reserve number on it, and I was nervous because I had put a very high reserve, but I really wanted it because this is an Xc60 T6, top of the line model, and it's all-wheel drive, which everybody wants, and it's R design, which is like the performance version, and it has the Polestar performance upgrade, so like Volvo's high performance upgrade, and it's Rebel Blue, which was Volvo's like cool, very characteristic blue color they did for a long time. This is, if you're gonna take an XC60 on a site like ours, this is the one. Like, this is the coolest XC60 that will ever exist. So we took it and we put a pretty high reserve on it, and but it sold, and it brought almost $21,000. And the reason for that is, again, you're not going to find another one like this. You can find XC60s everywhere, and there's some grumbling in the comments like, oh, that's a lot of money for a 10-year-old, 8-year-old Volvo. Well, yeah, but this isn't just any XC60. You're not going to find Rebel Blue. You're not going to find the Polestar upgrade. This is a cool car. If you're into Volvos, if you want a family crossover and you don't just want a normal, boring X3 like everybody else, here's a chance to get a pretty cool one. And I loved this thing. I loved it when it was pitched to us originally. I loved it when it was being auctioned. And now that it's sold, I'm not surprised that it got good money. Because cars like this, it's a special car, special color, performance upgrade. This is the cream of the crop. And again, stating if you have kind of a cream of the crop or a very special car, you're just going to get all the money, and that's what happened with this XC60. Next up, here's an interesting one. This 1995 Land Rover Defender 90 sold for $40,000. It's a North American specification Defender 90. Beluga black color, which is one of the more desirable colors. People really like black, and they're pretty uncommon. So the 95 North American spec Defenders were manual transmission. This particular truck was a one-owner example until 2019, and the North American spec Defenders still kind of bring more and more money because even though a lot of Defenders are being imported to the US right now, they're cool, they're special, everybody wants them, the North American spec trucks are still 50 state legal without any modifications. You can register in California, and they were just nicer than most of the imported ones. You know, the North American spec trucks were used kind of as cool beach cars and second cars and third cars, rather than as farm implements like a lot of Defenders. But anyway, this one brought $40,000, which I think was a market correct result given two big factors. One, it had some corrosion underneath. It wasn't that bad. If I had bought it and I considered maybe I might want it, I love Defenders. I have a North American spec Defender myself. If I had bought it, I would just drive it as is, probably could get many more years out of it. But if you're in the Northeast, it's probably going to keep getting rustier and rustier, so you might have to start thinking about a frame replacement within the next, I would say, 5 years. But then you're good forever because you can get a galvanized frame. So I guess it just kind of depends where it goes. But either way, that price is kind of market correct given the fact that it looked like the truck had some needs. The other important thing to mention about the North American spec Defender market, I hate to admit this given that I own one, but it is on its way down. Many more Defenders are being imported to North America. The NAS trucks still do carry a premium, there's no question. They have the V8, they're registerable all over, they're generally nicer shaped like I mentioned, but at the end of the day, so many Defenders have arrived and so many states allow them to be registered that these NAS trucks are never going to command, I think, the premium that they once did. If you look at like shipping manifests, like the number of Defenders that are being imported to the US by all manner of importers all throughout primarily the East Coast and the South, just Defenders are coming in by the truckload. So I love my NAS Defender. I wouldn't trade it for a foreign example. But I think that the truth is the NAS Defender premium is probably going to erode a little bit. These trucks are just becoming less special and incredibly rare. You're just seeing more and more Defenders around as more and more are getting imported. Okay, next up, this is a big sale that I was excited about. This 1998 Ford Contour SVT sold for $9,300, almost 10 grand for a Contour SVT. Now, for those who don't know, the Contour was sort of Ford's like kind of small to mid-sized car in the US in the late 90s. Then the SVT was the performance version, had a little extra power on these like cool looking side skirts and a manual transmission and sports suspension. It was a cool car. This particular example was a very low mileage car, one owner until 2020 and unmodified. And the seller was so confident in this car that he offered it with no reserve. And when you do that, when you offer things with no reserve, that tends to increase the interest and increase the visibility. And that's clearly what happened here. This car got almost to $10,000, which Contour SVTs do not sell for that. It was exciting, but this is one of the nicest Contour SVTs. So if one's it's gonna be this. Now, after this car sold, we had several other people submit their Contour SVTs to sell, thinking that we're now the place to sell SVT Contours, but they all wanted reserves and the cars were modified and they wanted a $9,000 reserve with a car with twice the mileage and modifications, and it doesn't really work that way. This car did well because it was offered with no reserve, because it was low mileage, because of the no modifications. If there is a really clean Contour SVT, I think we could probably replicate this result. Really nice ones deserve to get all the money, but you know, a ratty one is still a $4,000 car. Just because the nicest one sold for $9,300 doesn't mean they're all worth that now. But I know a lot of Contour SVT enthusiasts were happy with this number to see these cars maybe getting a little bit more interest and a little more excitement, and I certainly was. It was a good result, but it was a good result for a very excellent car, and so I think that was a market correct price. I don't think these are about to shoot up, but I do think nice Contour SVTs, maybe people are starting to pay another look to them, and they should. They were neat cars, and I've always kind of liked them. Okay, last car I want to cover on the market report, this 2012 Porsche 911 Turbo S Cabriolet, which did not sell. It was bid to $85,500. Got close. I was disappointed, obviously, that this car didn't sell. Big dollar cars are good for us, for our bottom line, but also just it's nice to sell stuff like that. But I think part of the problem with this car is 997s are becoming very popular right now because it was a great intersection of analog and performance. You know, after the 997, things got a little high tech and they don't feel as analog, the 991s. Plus, 997 was the last time you could get a turbo with a manual. And before the 997, the 996, the 993s, those cars kind of feel old. The 997 is sort of that sweet spot. It feels modern, it has modern performance. The problem I think with this car is the Turbo S was not offered with a manual transmission. So this has a PDK automatic, which is fine, and that was the best for performance, and it was a premium at the time. But these days, I think the focus on 997s right now is really in the stick shift versions. It's in getting the manual transmission with that modern performance. Any car that offers a manual and excellent performance is doing great right now. Just think Ford GT, Carrera GT, 997 Turbo, that's what people are interested in. And I think this particular car fell short because it doesn't have that groundswell of interest because it's an automatic. The fact that it's a convertible didn't help matters either. That's kind of the non-enthusiast body style, although personally I prefer the convertibles. It doesn't look as good, but it's more fun, especially if you live somewhere warm. The other thing I think hurting this car was it didn't come with the Turbo S wheels. The 997 Turbo came standard with these wheels. The Turbo S was upgraded to the center lock wheels, but you could choose the regular Turbo wheels at no cost. Now, the regular Turbo wheels looked better, there's no question, but the Turbo S center lock wheels were very distinctive, special wheels for just the Turbo S model. And so when a Turbo S lists without those wheels, people say, oh no, I really am going to hold out for one with the center locks. So I think this car just being convertible automatic with the wrong wheels, that probably is, those are the things kind of working against it, and so we didn't quite get there. 997 Turbos though are a hot commodity these days, and I hope to get a lot more of them on Cars and Bids. They are kind of the S2000 of that next price point, and I don't think we will ever see 997 Turbos really dip too far in value. They're really desirable, really special cars, and even though they only went out of production like 8-10 years ago, I already see that as being kind of like a 993 Turbo type car in the future. It's a car that I think people will always be attracted to, and I don't think you'll ever see prices get, 996 Turbos got into the 30s. I bought and sold one in the 30s in 2012. That's never going to happen with the 997 Turbo. That car is always going to be too sought after and too desirable, and values are always going to remain high. I suspect that's true. So that is my market report. Some really great sales recently on Cars and Bids, and there are some cars that I'm very excited about coming up. I might as well mention them since we're here. We have a Lincoln Town Car listed on the site right now that has only 8,000 original miles, one owner car. Everybody's always like, bring back the Panther platform. I wish I could buy a new Panther. Well, here's your chance. Here's a Panther car, body on frame, old school. You can buy it new with a naturally aspirated V8. We have a manual transmission SLK on the site at no reserve, which is very cool. We have our first DeLorean listed on the site right now. It has a manual and like 28,000 miles. And we have a Mercedes E63 AMG wagon with a rear-facing third row seat. So your rear passengers can wave to everybody that you pass, which is just really cool. But anyway, that's my market report. Some cars I'm excited about coming up. Check out Cars and Bids. We're doing great, and I'm thrilled with the progress so far. There's a lot more cool stuff to come, I have no doubt.